Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Very warm welcome to everyone, whether you're listening on YouTube or on the digital networks. I hope you enjoy today's show. We're going to be looking at the mysterious planetx and talking to our guest David Meade, who's written a book about it. Also speaking to Seth Davis from Two Real News. Let's go over to Seth right now. Seth, welcome back to Truth Sentinel.
Oh, thank you for having me, Scott. It's a great day to do an interview here. I mean, we got absolutely horrible rainy Washington weather outside today, so nothing better to do.
It's sweltering hot here, and it's actually it's midnight, and it's still really hot here. But I've
gotta love this planet.
Yeah. And talking of planets, what do you know about planetx?
A little bit, not nearly as much as your guest that you're going to have on, but just a little bit as far as what I've looked up and also what I've heard from people listening around the quote-unquote conspiracy theory circuit, as well as looking at NASA, like little documentaries and stuff they have on it. I mean, they take it a lot less seriously than some of the quote-unquote conspiracy people type stuff, but at the same time, it's a really interesting concept, and it's interesting to look into.
It is, and yeah, you brought up NASA. That was one of the things that struck me. Although, there's different ends of the spectrum with planetx, with the cataclysmic event that some people talk about, and the fact that people have identified that there could be a large planet out there that's yet undiscovered, and NASA have talked about that. But let's imagine there was a big planet out there and it was coming this way and potentially was coming quite close to Earth and would have some catastrophic effects. Do you think world leaders would cover up an impending sort of near collision with a major celestial body?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, just 100%. I mean, just like they cover up anything else.
Yeah, I must admit, as far as that goes, if that something like this was to happen and they knew about it, I think they probably would. And I wonder whether they should. I mean, I think probably my automatic reaction is no. But imagine if NASA did know that a large body was coming this way. What purpose would it be to actually tell people anyway? I'm just sort of brainstorming rather than saying it. They should.
No, indeed. It's just at the same time, it wouldn't serve a whole lot of purpose other than to panic everybody. But at the same time, how much do people really give a shit about the next election or Donald Trump or something like that when planetx, a giant planetoid, is flying directly towards Earth or at a near orbit with Earth that's going to completely destroy a bunch of basic systems here?
Yeah, because as far as I can ascertain, it's not necessarily going to collide with the Earth, but more the fact it will come so close will have some major effects, like polar shifts and things like that. It seems to tie in with deep underground military bases, that the elite know about this coming disaster and have sort of created these underground bases. Now, I'm sure some underground bases do exist. As to what their purpose is, have you got any idea whether there might be some underground bases out there and it sort of ties in with
there definitely are, Scott. There definitely are. It's just as to their purpose, it doesn't necessarily have to be anything related to planetx by any means at all. I mean, this could be stuff for just good old-fashioned COG, continuity of government, and everything from civil unrest, as they try and call it there, to outright war, to a nuclear war, to any of a number of like massive natural disasters, anything that you could think of like that. I mean, even a solar flare, where what a so-called Carrington event, where you could have like a major destruction of the power grid. Like pretty much everybody, for the most part, of the surface of the Earth would be without power, without electricity. The grid, as we know it, would be nothing. And stuff like that, I think, has a lot higher likelihood of being what those are used for, rather than necessarily just planetx or something like that. But again, try and keep an open mind to it. I mean, it's not like your guest that you're going to have on has any less credibility than some of these guys at NASA, who people just take like at their word for everything they say. Just because somebody says you should believe this person and the TV makes it seem as though there's an expert, then we need to believe them. I believe we had a show on experts there, Scott.
Yeah, we did some time back. You can find that on YouTube. I would be surprised if there aren't some underground bases. Just for things like the event of a nuclear war. But it's not very comforting to think that if there was a nuclear war and say most of humanity was wiped out, that the people who would get to survive are the worst kind of people. The people
exactly the very ones that caused it in the first place.
So they could start again. It would be a real shame. But we've talked about end time prophecies and eschatology, when we did the show with L.A. Marzulli. And I just wanted to look into the psychology a bit more as well. I mean, I think I share sometimes the boredom that people have with sometimes when life can become a bit mundane, and you wish that something would happen to shake up the world. You just, you feel like we've got quite a passive population, and some kind of event would shake up the world. But, at the same time, I think the actuality of that, if it did happen, might not be so good. But I think it's maybe because people are dissatisfied with their lives and dissatisfied with the times they're living in. I think a lot of people believe that life could be a lot better, and that the elites are kind of sort of stifling things and making life more restricted. And also I think there may be some other factors going on, that people are attracted to danger. So the idea of a cataclysmic event and having to sort of survive again, going back to basic survival instincts, sort of buys into the same kind of attraction that extreme sports has. And people would love to go back to the old days of surviving in the wild. I think we've lost some of that with the technology age that we live in.
Absolutely. I mean, just Scott, to back you up there, greatest example as any is look at all the disaster movies. Look at the zombie shows and the zombie movies and the zombie apocalypse. Everything's apocalypse. Look at the Christian apocalypse shows and movies and everything out there. Look at the alien apocalypse type movies and everything out there. It goes and it goes and it goes, and it really never stops. I mean, you even have shows like, a Revolution out there or anything like that. It's the exact same sort of an idea of people glorifying and reveling in the idea that at some point there's going to be some sort of mass death, mass extinction amongst people, and like mass civil unrest. And then like a small percentage of people are going to have to survive through this. And they just keep, I don't know. It's like people worshiping at the font of their own destruction, because so few of them understand that they have zero of the skills. They have not one single one of the skills that they would need to survive in the wilderness right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think people would like to think they have the skills, but I think if we got to that situation, people would soon learn that we've lost them. We've lost all those skills.
Yeah, and they take a lifetime to learn. You can't just learn this in like 40 minutes of YouTube videos, for God's sakes.
Yeah, exactly. Hunting, fishing, cooking, cleaning, protecting yourself against... if there was a breakdown in society, then as can be seen in, as is sort of shown in the fictional TV series The Walking Dead, which I am a bit of a fan of, actually. You're going to have to protect yourself against other communities that sort of, as you begin to realize that the strongest are going to survive, there's going to be violence, and you're going to, how many people could actually defend themselves when fighting and things like that. But have you ever been tempted to learn more about survival or become a prepper or anything like that?
Well, absolutely. I've actually learned quite a few of those skill sets myself just being out here, but not nearly enough to like goad myself into thinking that I'd be able to survive outside in the wilderness by myself with minimal tools and minimal help there at all. I mean, just looking at somebody, what do they call him? The Iceman Otze that they found, that's supposed to be like a couple 1,000-year-old caveman that was frozen in ice there. As they thaw this guy out, just look that up. Anybody listening to that, look up Otze the Iceman and look what they found with him. Just look at our own human ancestors, people that we would consider by modern day standards like absolute backwards barbarians, that literally have entire systems of antibiotics that they know how to use, of different mushrooms and things, that they have anything you can think of. They have different sets of like acupuncture type stuff to help with people with Alzheimer's. They have metallurgy and metalworking beyond anything that anybody here could do if the power grid were to go out like right now. I mean, so many people have completely forgotten all these basic human skill sets that got us to where we are right now in this mass age of technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Our ancestors were far smarter than most people wanted to give them credit for ever.
They were, yeah. I mean, the people who thrive these days are business people and techies, basically. And I think the attraction with the idea of a cataclysmic event is that people could go back to something that was more within their control. Because if you're struggling in modern society, you're struggling to pay the bills like many people are. There's not much you can do about it. Whereas if you're struggling to eat and find shelter, and you were able to actually do something about that, to go fishing and hunting, you'd have that within your control. You could do something about it. I think people feel a bit helpless, and they kind of wish that society would maybe revert back to a more basic level, so they they could actually learn some of these skills and try and survive in a way that was within their control.
Oh, indeed. It's just these aren't really necessarily skills that you can learn easily, just hit the ground running type thing. Bear Grylls or any of these guys, what people get used to with the Man versus Wild or any of this, I don't think people realize those guys are trained as survivalists and have actually learned that skill set over their entire lifetime and didn't necessarily just like, oh, well, I spent about like 4 hours in the wilderness after the grid goes down, and now all of a sudden I know how to create snares for animals there. I know how to clean and gut an animal. I know how to like cut off different pieces of meat, what's usable, what's not. I know what organs I can use, what I can't. I know how to tan leather, any of that type of stuff. Like none of that just comes to you. So I'd say people need to be careful what they wish for because they just might end up getting it. But back to Planet X here, or at least trans-Neptunian objects, I really thought it was interesting that many people try to completely and totally just smash on the idea of Planet X and act as though it's some completely ridiculous idea, when even Eris, I believe it was Makemake, Huamea, Sedna, and Orcus, and a couple other trans-Neptunian objects that are out there. Most of them are a little bit smaller or about the size of Pluto, but still, those are objects in our own solar system we are aware of right now that exist beyond Neptune.
Right, yeah, I think that's where it's supposed to be, isn't it? And it remains to be seen, really. I mean, some people predicting that it's going to happen this month or next month. Our guest, who's coming up in a moment, believes it's happening in 2017. But the question is it going to happen? And is it going to bring a return to the old ways of survival? Maybe now's the right time to go and talk to David Meade about Planet X. Thanks for joining us, Seth.
You're very welcome, Scott.
So today we're going to talk about Planet X. Recently, two respected planetary scientists from the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, in Pasadena announced evidence for a body nearly the size of Neptune, yet unseen, orbits the Sun every 15,000 years apparently. Is this the mysterious Planet X that people have been seeking? Let's talk to David Meade, a specialist in research and investigations who studied astronomy at the University of Louisville and is a guest writer for Planet X News, an author of numerous books, including his most recent, Planet X, the 2017 arrival. Welcome to Truth Sentinel, David.
Well, good to meet you, Scott.
You too. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into investigating the subject of Planet X?
Right. Well, after graduating from the University of Louisville many years ago, I did a lot of forensic investigations, both in the public and the private sector. And in fact, the last 10 years, I've worked primarily with Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies, written special reports for management, primarily boards of directors and the CEOs of these companies. So I'm somewhat of a specialist in research and investigations. Now, I've written a number of books. One, in fact, was just on the subject of the topic of research. I got into Planet X about 5 years ago. I did some look-see into the topic of the missing money from the Pentagon. I don't know if you recall, but the day before 9/11, Don Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, announced at a press conference that $2.2 trillion was missing from the Pentagon's budget. Well, when I heard that, I realized obviously it was black ops money. And almost simultaneously, I ran into a video or two by a fellow named Phil Schneider, who talked about deep underground military bases. I think Phil used to work at Groom Lake, Area 51. And in any case, I happened to get into that type of profile information. And almost immediately thereafter, I was introduced to the topic of Planet X, and it all sort of tied in. In fact, Phil, I think, said that in his opinion, I think he said that in the 1990s, they could tunnel through a rock face at the rate of 7 miles per day. And I have heard sources which have indicated they've built over 130 of them. He claims a large amount more. They seem to be an average of 1 to 4 miles underground, an average of 5 to 7 cubic miles in size, built largely away from geologic tectonic areas. But, if you have a new geotectonic fault and you have a force 11, 12, 13, or 14 earthquake, well, guess what? I don't think they're going to make a whole lot of difference. In any case, Project Omega under Colorado oversees all secret agencies. And this is all a tie-in to Planet X. So I started looking at that topic, as much profile information as I could get. And there's a lot of disinformation out there, and there's a lot of real information. There's a lot of real sources. There's human intelligence, there's signal intelligence, there's photographic evidence, there's all kinds of things out there, but it can take a year or two just to sort through it to get some sort of a objective view of what is really occurring. So anyway, I enjoy relating science to the book of the Apocalypse, and I believe planetx could be a perfect marriage of the two. And so between my study of eschatology, Bible prophecy, and science, astronomy, and my research into where did all that money go, it led into my look-see at planetx.
Okay, and Phil Schneider, he actually, some people would say he died in suspicious circumstances, right?
Right. I believe the last video I saw of him was about 2 months before his demise. It was shortly after the year 2000, and he indicated there had been 12 or 13 attempts on his life at that point. So about 2 months later, that was it. So I don't know whether he died for some rare illness, which I know he did have a variety of illnesses from his what you might call his contact experiences, but in any case, he might have also, been done away with. I'm not 100% sure on that.
And has anyone actually seen these underground bases? I know Jesse Ventura featured them a bit on his TV series, Conspiracy Theory. But do you know anyone else who's actually seen these underground bases?
Well, there's the base that's in West Virginia. I believe it's called Greenbrier. And that's a very interesting base. It can hold all of Congress. And you can actually tour that base, to my knowledge. I've never been in it, but I've seen a photo or media gallery tour of it. It was built in the 1960s. It was secret or classified for about 30 years. And then a major news channel or magazine did a story on it, and they declassified it. And the hotel, spa, resort that's associated with it, I think actually allows occasional tours of it. And it holds over 1,000 people, underground. It's very sophisticated. It's a good nuclear, protective base. But these underground bases are something a little more than that. For nuclear protection, you might need, 2 or 3, 4 of these. But why do we possibly have hundreds or even more? That's the big question. And why is all this money missing? I don't think it would take 2.2 trillion. It might take 0.2 trillion. It might take a fifth of a trillion to build one of these bases. But 2.2 trillion would indicate right there, close to 10 or 12 bases. So I know Jesse did a story, and I recall the video. He looked at, with some other investigative journalist types, such as myself, he looked at the Denver International Airport, and it has some very strange murals depicting the end of the world. So he looked at this for a while, and he said, I think they interviewed a truck driver or someone who had some experience. But in terms of actual photos of that base, apparently, obviously, it's impossible to obtain those. I've looked at some of another investigator's work on underground bases, and I have seen pictures of some of them in some areas. Of course, we all know that Space Command has an underground base. We know there's an underground base in Colorado. We know, of course, as I mentioned, the underground base in West Virginia. And the government has admitted to several underground bases in the, Baltimore, Maryland, D.C. area. But well above and beyond that, look at Russia and China. They've got thousands and tens of thousands of underground shelters. Russia's got a place built into the mountains that can hold 250,000 people, government, civilian, all types. And China's got underground bases so large they can contain submarines and jet aircraft. So it's not really too uncommon. And I think a lot of this building started in the late 70s, early 80s. And the Greenbrier base, that was built in the 60s, but that was for nuclear protection. I think these other bases have been built since then. And most of them, again, are classified. But Phil has some very interesting videos on his experience there. And Jesse Ventura has done some investigation. Jesse did a tour of an underground, I don't know if you'd call it a base, but an underground facility that was in the Ozarks. Now, that it turned out after the fact, I looked into it, that is primarily a base for manufacturing and storage because it almost super cools what's in there, and it's used by some Fortune 1000 companies for medical and other purposes.
Okay.
So some of these natural underground structures, actually exist.
And those paintings at Denver Airport certainly are very strange to put up in an airport. Well, you also mentioned photographic evidence of planetx. What kind of evidence is there?
Well, I've analyzed several videos. I've looked at several videos, several still photographs. There's some pretty good photos out there on the internet in terms of the the South Pole, the Davis station at the South Pole. In terms of photographic analysis of Planet X, there was an individual, an ex-college professor named Vaughn, who produced a 20 megapixel RAW file with a Sony digital camera of a photograph he took, I believe, on April 11th, 2015. It was taken around sunset while he was flying down the Pacific side of Central America. He sent the report in for analysis to an investigator similar to myself, and my friend, the analyst, took it and analyzed the metadata. I think it was taken at 240 dots per inch, high resolution. The metadata showed the date, time, GPS coordinates. He used a very sophisticated Sony, I believe it was a DSC HX50V camera. So anyway, using a Starry Night professional version, the analyst did a field of view analysis. And this is one of the photographic analysis topics covered in my book, Planet X, the 2017 Arrival. And he determined Mercury is above superior conjunction with the Sun. The object in the field of view, therefore, is not Mercury. Mercury didn't have wings, as does this object. And Mercury doesn't have the brightness or contrast of this unknown object. And the analyst also performed what's called a gamma test on a paint program. Now, gamma testing shows if an object is hot or cold. Hot objects generate their own light, like our sun. A lens flare would be a cold object, for example. They redirect light. They don't generate it. So he started with a gamma of 1, reduced it by steps. At 0.10, I believe, the gamma illustrates stark differences. And 0.01, all you have left are the really hottest and brightest objects. Then he reduced brightness to a value of -2 or 3 and contrast to a +2. So the hot objects faded in together, proving they were genuine. Then he ran a luminance test to determine the intensity of the object, and he determined it was behind the sun, not a reflection. There are wings on the object, which is clearly behind the sun. And this, as he stated, is deeply disturbing. The reason is that gas tails of comets follow solar winds. They are not visible until the comet's orbit is inside of Jupiter, at which point the luminosity of our sun makes the tails of the comet or planet visible. So the object, which is clearly Planet X by deductive logic and process of elimination, is therefore now between Mars and Jupiter. It's not in the outer reaches of the solar system, as these Caltech guys are talking about. That's something I believe entirely different. I believe that's part of the disinformation program. It can be clearly seen in this photo, especially from the southern hemisphere. And as of April 2015, this tells us that Nebra, or Planet X, is now close enough to the sun that the sun's light is reflected in the tail, making it appear like wings. Now, in that same connection with that same analysis, there was not too far from where I live, it's called Sanibel Island, Florida, southwest Florida. On the Sanibel Causeway, a lady named Melissa Huffman, a photographer, took a video of an unknown object, and I believe it's gone somewhat viral, over 1 million views in the last 6 months. And the object is very interesting. You can find it by perhaps Googling on YouTube Melissa Huffman, Huffman, and Sanibel and Planet X. Now, the object, she pans the sky, and it shows the object and then the moon. It's clearly a planet visible just north of the sun. Now, using a stellarium and knowing the moon phases, comparing it to her video of the moon, you can go to the derived date, take away the atmosphere and the ocean, and you can determine the relationship of the stars to the horizon. So to first determine the date, if you follow the moon on the charts, it's well below the horizon in all dates after September 26. Therefore, the video was taken earlier in September. Now, if you look at September 2015 moon phases, any chart on that, that gives us a comparable to the moon in the video. And if you look at the moon phases diagram to the actual picture of the moon in her video, it has to have been photographed on September 23rd, 2015, based on the phasing of the moon. Now, on that date, if you look in stellarium, Mercury is very, very dim, somewhat above the horizon, and in a much different location than the unknown object All other planets are below the horizon. The video therefore plainly shows an unidentified planet or object of some magnitude quite clearly, and I can reach really no other conclusion other than this is a rare photo from this hemisphere of Planet X approaching us.
I seem to remember when looking into this that there's a place that you say that people can go online and enter the coordinates.
Right. Well, that's a very interesting anomaly. I'll brief you on that. There's an object I call the Red Dragon Anomaly, and it's part of a Google or NASA cover-up in some respect. And the areas of what we call the Red Dragon Anomaly have been covered up or patched up by Google Sky in the past. But one of the ways to actually see what is behind this patched out area is to use Skyview by NASA. Skyview is a virtual observatory on the net that generates images of any part of the sky from wavelengths of all regimes, from radio to gamma ray depiction based on filters. And when one views these images in various filters, you can see the actual color of this anomaly in the constellation Virgo, by chance, is red. And it does look very menacing, as it appears to have a face like a dragon with two profound eyes. It's very intriguing and quite strange. And I'll provide very briefly the right ascension and declination for your listeners. Here it is. Just cut and copy this coordinate as follows: 13 hours, 50 minutes, 44 seconds, and the declination is minus 8, 13 minutes, and 59.7 seconds. So right ascension is the celestial equivalent of longitude, east or west, and latitude in the sky is called declination. So the celestial equator has a declination of 0, north and south are plus and minus. So anyway, then on Skyview, just choose the Iris 100 micron telescope setting, and there you are. You've never seen an object quite like this one. As to what it is, the astronomical scientific community is keeping a low profile. The question is, why did they ever cover it up to begin with?
So that object, that's not Planet X, that's something else.
It is an anomaly. I don't know what it is. But anything that they cover up, that they have covered up in the past, I think has to point our attention to it. I do not know what it is. Professional astronomers make no comment about it. They call it an anomalous object, and it is a very suspicious object since it has been blacked out. It might be Planet X. I don't know what it is.
How about the Vatican Observatory? What do they say about all this, about Planet X? Are they aware it's coming?
Right. Well, I don't know. I'm sure you've heard of a fellow named Father Malachi Martin, who was a Jesuit priest, and he taught at a Vatican graduate school, and he believed that the reason the Vatican has an observatory, and I believe it's located at Mount Graham in Arizona on the top of a 10,000-foot mountain. I've looked at pictures of it. It has several telescopes, and the Vatican has spent millions of dollars quietly building one of the most technologically advanced observatories in southern Arizona, and it's specifically for the purpose of viewing and tracking Planet X on its inbound journey. And they've deliberately kept their involvement in this enterprise quiet, with the exception of a few people that have spoken out, such as Malachi Martin. And some sources have gone to the trouble of searching out the location and photographing it. Its existence is carefully documented. So I believe the Vatican hierarchy in Rome regards Planet X as the prophesied and much dreaded wormwood of Revelation chapter 8. They know it's coming, and they're spending millions of dollars to track it on its inbound journey, and that's what Malachi Martin basically has stated and implied in various interviews.
Yeah, I've often read about that wormwood in Revelations and wondered what that is. Some people said, translated into Russian, it's Chernobyl. So some people speculated it was something to do with that, but I don't think so. It seems to refer to a star in the Bible.
Right. It does refer to something that has very high impact value. In fact, if you look at Revelation 8, I'll turn briefly to it here. I've got a reference to it. It said, "And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon a third part of the rivers. And the name of the star is called Wormwood." So apparently it causes major impact damage, and Chernobyl was highly localized. And so it's going to be something that's going to make a major impact and affect a major part of the world. In fact, if you look in the Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, there's not just one asteroid, but there's two that are approaching and are going to actually hit parts of the Earth. So according to the very highest authority there, the book of the Apocalypse, there's going to be a couple of these incidents, and one of them is called Wormwood, and I believe that's in Revelation. The Wormwood star is in Revelation chapter 8.
Also the name of a plant, I think, from the Artemis family. And,
Good point.
It also translates to mean bitterness, I believe.
You're right. And in fact, from that chapter in Revelation, it mentions that the waters will become bitter. Maybe that's why they named it like that. Changing
the subject slightly, in 1999 a bronze disc was found with a metal detector in Germany, and it's known as the Nebra sky disc. I know you've written about it in your book. What's its connection to Planet X?
Well, that's very, very interesting. It is an unconventional discovery. It was found near Europe's oldest observatory in Gossec. And the story of the disk, it was found in 1999 by German treasure hunters using metal detectors inside an ancient forest. But German law dictated that all such relics are state property, so instead of turning it in, they attempted to sell it on the international market in 2002. Now, working for the Swiss government, I believe an archaeologist named Harold Meller posed as a straw buyer who's working for Interpol. The disc was then seized by authorities and then was evaluated by proper authorities. Now, it contains symbols, including the sun, the moon, several constellations, I believe Pleiades, Capricorn, Piraeus, and Gemini. The disc reflects the sun and the position of a solar eclipse. So what is causing the eclipse? Well, it's not the moon, which is on the opposite side of where it should be located. So the best deductive logic is that an unknown near-Earth object is causing the eclipse. To give you a little more briefing on it, it's a 32-centimeter disk, weighs about 2 kilograms. It's decorated with gold leaf symbols, reflects the 4 planets, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury. Now, using modern-day astronomical software, you can plot the actual day and hour the disk was produced. The result is April 6, 1810 BC at 8:30 a.m. Thus, it was created, I believe, during the Bronze Age, 3,826 years ago. Now, there's a curved bar at the bottom of a riverbank, the Saal River, which still currently exists. And much of the disk's current coloration is green, I think, due to a tarnishing effect. The discovery site was a prehistoric enclosure in the Ziegelrada forest, known by the name of Mittelberg or Central Hill, that's 60 kilometers west of Leipzig. The treasure hunters found it within a pit of the forest near the ancient Gossec Observatory. Now, a very interesting point upon examination is that the disk reflects the constellation Orion at the very bottom. Orion should not have been observable from that location in Germany at that time. The nearest location from which it could have been observed is Luxor, Egypt, further adding to the mystery. The only logical conclusion is that the 26 to 30 degree difference is accounted for by a simultaneous pole shift. Therefore, what we've got with this mystery-shrouded sky disk of Nebra is an advanced astronomical clock. It's a compendium of knowledge from the earliest times, and I believe gives us the best proof of the existence and passage of Planet X in the ancient world. It's the oldest visual representation of the sky in existence, and it postulates the approach of a near-Earth object causing the daytime eclipse, as well as causing a major pole shift that has just occurred 3,826 years ago.
I was looking into pole shifts, and there seems to be a lot of conflicting information about them. If there was a polar shift, what would you say would be the implications for people living on the Earth?
Well, there's a concept called strategic relocation. Good question. Where a number of books have been written on this topic is where should you really be living, knowing that this is approaching. What will happen will depend on where you are and the degree of the pole shift. If it's more than 20 or 30 degrees, it could turn Canada into a frozen tundra. Now, where you are in the United States, basically just depends on the state. Let me cover a couple of options and things that could happen. Now, the U.S. Navy, by the way, is familiar with this pole shift. There's a map that's out. You've probably seen it on the internet that shows the southern coast, the east coast, and the west coast flooded to 50 to 100 miles inland. Now, what's happening is the magnetic poles have been shifting right now towards Russia at the rate of over 40 miles per year. But when Planet X arrives, the physical poles will shift. This will create a variety of tsunamis, hyper-earthquakes of never-before-experienced magnitude, and the shifting of land masses and plates. Now, California, for example, is composed of rock plates. When rock is compressed, it breaks, and you'll see the crumbling of rock as its mass is pushed upwards. So the West Coast will have major catastrophic changes, and they will combine, in my opinion, to synergistic proportions. Tidal waves will assault the coastline. High hurricane-force winds will erode the coast. Earthquakes will occur on the fault lines. Volcanic activity will erupt over pools of magma. Forest fires will be caused by volcanic explosions, severe lightning storms. So California is highly dangerous. The primary long-term danger in riding out the shifts will be for those who are living near the boundaries of plates. Cities without mountains, for example, as a backdrop, could be washed out to sea. Very high-level quakes can create broken gas and water lines, chaos. San Francisco and the San Andreas and related fault lines are highly dangerous. A lot of the population will be trapped. Water can overflow a city. Survival could be minimal in those areas. But then you go to areas like Arizona or Colorado. Let's look at Arizona. In Arizona, I would say the Hoover Dam will probably not survive the high Richter levels of earthquake activity, and rivers will probably flood the areas within maybe 20 miles of currently existing rivers. But much of Arizona and cities such as Phoenix will be unaffected, with the exception of wind damage or volcanic dust. Arizona has withstood many a pole shift. The area around Tucson is safe. It's surrounded by mountains, and flash floods may create some lakes, but Arizona is well beyond any danger from tidal waves. But Florida, on the other hand, has the highest elevation, 105 meters in the Florida Panhandle. So this part of the state may not be able to survive. The majority of the state may not be able to. As for Central and South Florida and the Florida Keys, I believe these parts will be devastated by a tide of water. And Colorado, go back to that, that's very, very safe. The domestic division of the CIA is relocating to Colorado. That should give you, readers and listeners, many clues right there. Eastern Colorado descends into plains and has various rivers from the hills onto these plains. And some of these streams and rivers will be a port of safety in the aftermath of a pole shift. And, of course, one of the safest areas in the country is the Ozarks, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri. They have an average elevation of 800 to 1,000 feet. And they're self-sufficient with water supply. They have ample agricultural land. They'll do well, and they're also isolated from large metropolitan areas. They're absolutely well enough inland to avoid flooding through tidal waves.
You seem fairly convinced this is going to happen. What would you say is the biggest piece of evidence that you've come across that made you think this is going to happen, and why 2017?
Well, there's so much evidence. Just getting to the evidence part for a minute. In terms of where did the money go? Why do we have all these underground bases? Why do we have the seed vault in near Norway? It was built. It contains about 3 million types of seeds, 500 million seeds in all. Why is the government spending anywhere from 30 billion per bunker upwards? Why? They're 4 cubic miles, 1 mile down. Sweden, I understand, has one that's 30 square miles, and so why do we have so many of these? I think you've got a lot of circumstantial evidence. I think you could almost prove this beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law in terms of the strange events, the blackouts of information, the disinformation, the photos and the photographic analysis that has been done on them. And you look at all the earth change effects we've had in the last 7 years. And 50 years ago, you had one volcano one volcano a month, 35 volcanoes a year, say. Now you've got 35 volcanic eruptions a day. So you've got so many earth changes that, especially since I would say 2011, that it simply something doesn't make sense. You've got insiders such as the CIA insider who published about a 15-minute video. His code name is Arizona. It's on the YouTube channel. And he discusses how they've watched it coming inbound. He said it's a large red iron oxide planet. It's a brown or red dwarf is what it is. Basically, brown and red dwarfs are very similar. They're both small suns, and they range in size from 8 to 50% of the mass of our sun. And he did a video on it. He's very credible. He says he's watched it through the Hubble telescope until the Hubble telescope was shut down. And he said the CIA people that he talked to said that the pole shift would occur within a 29 or 30-minute period when it reached, perihelion with our sun, closest approach to the sun and the Earth. And this is something which has been, studied for years and years. People have actually looked at it since, I would say seriously, since the late 1970s. Robert Harrington was head of the U.S. Naval Observatory, and he had an assistant who in 1978 discovered the moon. It's called Charon, the moon of Pluto. So Pluto, as you know, is a dwarf star. It's no longer classified as a major planet. It's simply a dwarf planet. And the reason they were looking in that vicinity, and I think the reason for the Pioneer project, is that they were attempting to discover what was causing perturbations in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. And when they found out that the moon of Pluto was so small, and therefore Pluto was as small as it is, they realized it couldn't be causing it. So what the government did in 1983, it did a joint venture between Britain, Norway, and the United States, and it set up the International Infrared Astronomical Satellite, put it in Earth orbit, did a couple of sky views, operated for 2 to 3 months, and it found several anomalous objects, including what they dubbed back then planetx. And then it was shut down, and one insider has stated that the reason it was shut down was that so it could do further sky views of this particular object without requiring any further explanation. But in any case, if you looked at the Washington Post, the New York Times, or other magazines around the end of 1983, the beginning of 1984, there are several widely publicized interviews, and there are several widely publicized articles in astronomy. I think October of 82, New York Times, January 30th of 83, U.S. News World Report was September 10th, 84, Newsweek was June 28th, 1982, New York Times was June 19th, 1982. Then there's an article, The Search for the 10th Planet in Astronomy, December of 1981. In any case, they called it, I think the Newsweek article is very interesting. John Anderson of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena said that the sun has an unseen companion, a dark star, gravitationally bound to it, but billions of miles away. And then the New York Times talks about the irregularities in the orbital path of Uranus, and U.S. News and World Report actually tags this object planetx. And it said last year the infrared astronomical satellite IRIS, circling in a polar orbit 560 miles from the Earth, detected heat from an object 50 billion miles away that is now the subject of intense speculation. And the director of the Palomar Observatory for the California Institute of Technology, Jerry Newsberger, stated, all I can say now is that we don't know what it is yet. But beyond that, there was a blackout on the topic from 1984 onward. I believe at that point they realized how serious it was. They decided to top secret compartmentalize any information related to it, and you simply heard nothing more about it.
And who actually was Dr. Robert Harrington?
Well, he was the head of the observatory. He was actually going to release a paper on the finding of planetx. He took a small telescope down to New Zealand, and Harrington studied this for a number of years. He was the supervising astronomer at the U.S. Naval Observatory, and he believed that X was tilted 30 degrees from the ecliptic, the main plane of the solar system. And he analyzed photographs using what's called a blink comparison technique, which was originated by the rather famous Pluto discoverer, Clyde Tombaugh. And Harrington postulated that planet X was indeed inbound to the solar system, and he sent back reports of this rather ominous discovery, but then he died of what was reported to be esophageal cancer before he could pack up his telescope and come home to a highly publicized press conference. And the strange thing is, he was down at Black Birch in April of 1991, 2 years before his death, at Black Birch Observatory in New Zealand. He was using a rather modest 8-inch telescope, similar to that used by Mr. Tombaugh, and he was looking at the constellation Centaurus. And all of a sudden, he, right before he returned and performed a press conference, guess what? He came down with this cancer, which normally takes 6 to 12 months to caused someone to pass away, and he passed away in about 3 weeks. So it was very rapid onset and didn't make any sense. And then in his obituary stated that Bob Harrington died on January 23rd, 1993, after a short but determined battle against esophageal cancer. He left his wife Betty, 2 daughters, a sister, and his parents. Now, the U.S. Naval Observatory went out of its way to tell a story about his final achievement, stating in his final years he'd lost interest in the search for Planet X. But that's the exact opposite of the truth. So really, secrecy about the approach of Planet X could have been much better achieved by not mentioning his interest in the later years. So why did they concoct this lie gratuitously? Well, perhaps because they're not very clever.
Sadly, we're running out of time on this episode, but could you explain why you think Planet X is going to arrive on September 2017?
Sure. Well, now, that involves some astronomical calculations, and it involves the book of the Apocalypse, the Revelation. So basically, you look at Revelation chapter 12, and you see an object. You see what's called in the book of Revelation a great wonder, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, her head a crown of 12 stars, and she being with a child, travailed in birth, and so forth. And then it says there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great dragon. And so if you look at astronomy computer programs such as Stellarium, you'll notice that on September 23rd, 2017, and this is a once in 7,000 year phenomenon, the moon will be in that exact position under the feet of Virgo, the Virgo constellation. The sun will be over the constellation, overlaying it in sunlight. Jupiter will be between Virgo's legs with child. Mercury, Mars, and Venus will be in alignment next to her head, adding 3 stars to the constellation Leo, forming a crown of 12 above Virgo's head. So all 4 of these events and celestial bodies will be in place on that date. So that's a very precise celestial date. And then what happens right after that is you have the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, states a great red dragon appears. And it appears while the woman is still, quote, pregnant. Now, this retrograde and positive motion of Virgo inside Virgo by the planet Jupiter, making this astronomical sign fulfill the pregnancy part of the prophecy, happens for about 42 weeks or 400 days, and it ends. It ends on, I believe, October 11th. So
that's
the
my birthday,
pregnancy,
by the way.
Oh, it is. Well, that's happy birthday. The very odd. That's interesting. What a coincidence. The pregnancy of that woman by the exit of planet Jupiter ends on your birthday, October 11th, 2017. So basically what happens is you've got to have this object, this red dragon, appearing after September 23rd, 2017, but before October 11th, 2017, because after that the woman will no longer, quote, be pregnant. The red dragon must make its appearance, Planet X, let's call it, before October 11th. So the only date where the Planet X could fully eclipse the sun and cover the whole Earth in full moon and shadow is Thursday, October 5th, 2017. So that's the only full moon that occurs after September 23rd, 2017, the great sign of the woman, but before October 11th, 2017, the end of the woman's pregnancy. And so the red dragon is visible. This can only happen during a full disk solar eclipse. Otherwise, the blue daytime sky would hide the red dragon, Planet X, and all of the stars in the heavens except the sun. And the red dragon is standing in front of the woman. The woman was about to give birth. It's before October 11th. And basically, the red dragon's approach to the Earth will be hidden by the blue daytime sky until it's very close. It won't become visible to observers until it begins to eclipse the sun. And the context of the red dragon's appearance, therefore, is within hours of the time that it, collides near the Earth, or that parts of it collide. It has a tail, probably 1 to 5 million miles long. And these objects that are anywhere from, 50 meters to several miles long are in its tail. So in the analysis, the only choice left for the full moon of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 12, is the full moon of October 5th, 2017. So there's strong evidence, I believe beyond a reasonable doubt, that the Revelation Apocalypse links October 5th, 2017, with the appearance of Planet X.
That's not fair. That's before my birthday. Do you think these meteorites that we've seen recently, one in Scotland in the past couple of months, and one in Chelyabinsk in Russia, do you think they're linked to this at all?
Right. I think these are precursors to Planet X, along with the mass animal and bird deaths, along with the major sinkholes, along with the bizarre weather that has occurred, along with all of these matters. These are just simply precursors as the magnetosphere from Planet X interacts with the sun's magnetosphere and the interacts with the Earth's magnetosphere. So that's an explanation right there.
Well, thanks very much for coming on to the show and telling us about Planet X, David. Do you have any details about where people can go to find out more about your book and learn more about Planet X?
Right. The book is on a variety of online sources, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble online. You can buy it through an Apple bookstore, Kobo, which is Australia, New Zealand, UK, and Canada. So all of these places, but Amazon.com is an easy place to find it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been nice chatting to you about Planet X, and you're always welcome to come back again and talk to us. Maybe, if this doesn't happen, I hope it doesn't happen, because I want a birthday in 2017. But if it doesn't, because you've obviously, in your title, you've been quite specific. So what will you do if it doesn't happen? Will you write another book explaining that?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. What if it doesn't happen? I think if we miss a date, we just have to look at the evidence again, because I believe it basically has to happen. It has to happen because the circumstantial evidence, the scientific evidence, the human reports, the signal intelligence we've gotten, everything that's out there indicates it's on its way, and the only large remaining unknown factor is the date, which I believe, if you believe Scripture is perfect and accurate, I believe that the book of the Apocalypse might just well be telling us the date, and using the philosophical principle, I believe it was called back in the 11th, 12th century, Occam's razor, the simplest solution is the best. And the simplest solution would simply be to believe that the book of Revelation is portraying this accurately. It's not symbolic. It's very real what is being portrayed in Revelation chapter 6, 8, and 12. And it's indicating not one but two asteroids. And one is called the Red Dragon or Planet X. And so I think if you use that philosophical principle, the simplest explanation is the best. Let's just accept that as being the most logical explanation that gives us guidance as to the date and time.
Thanks once again for joining us, David.
Good to hear from you, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay, thanks very much, David. Goodbye.
Okay, goodbye.
So, thanks for listening. What do you think about Planet X? Do you think there's anything to this story? Let us know. Remember, you can leave the voicemails on www.truthsentinel.co.uk. Also leave links in the chat box there. We always appreciate any donations, which you can make by clicking on our donations button at the bottom of our website, and you can also buy political t-shirts from truthtshirts.com and use the code TRUTH1, that's TRUTH1, to get your 10% discount, and we get a small donation as well from those t-shirts. If you'd like to sponsor us in any way or come on as a guest, or if you have any other ideas you want to contact us about, email us at scottsentinel9@gmail.com. That's scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Have a good week, and please join us again for our next episode. Thank you. Goodbye.